Grab your cup of coffee. Sit down for a story. Let's all go exploring. Making it after 40. Making it after 40. Making it after 40.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Making It After 40. I am your host, Lisa Rodriguez. I am an actor and writer who is still trying to make it after the age of 40. On this show, we explore what it means to be an artist trying to make it as a middle-aged person. First off, I have to thank all of you for the outpouring of support for the show and our guests so far. This means the world to me. Each download and subscription helps get the show to more people, which supports the show more than you know. So, thank you. Today, our guest is Ron Song. Ron is a second act actor, which means he has had a full life and career in a completely different industry, and only 3 years ago, on the verge of turning 50, he started going out for commercials and TV and film auditions. Turns out, his timing was right on because he booked several roles right out the gate, some of which we can't discuss, but you can see him on Season 2, Episode 1 of Dave, and more recently in Episode 1 of Gaslit. I do have a little disclaimer for this episode. This interview was the first in-person interview I tried, and unfortunately, the sound quality did not meet my standards. I cleaned it up as best I could, but you will notice there are moments where the sound is funky, and you'll hear my puppy from time to time trying to get our attention. So I apologize for that. The worst part is in the first 5 minutes. So if you can get through that, I promise it gets better. And the conversation is worth listening to. Ron shares with us his journey to deciding that acting was the right path for him, which is something he discussed with his family in a really beautiful way. And he also gets into how he finds beauty in the process of a large group of people coming together to bring this script to life. So please take some time and enjoy the show. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in to listen today. Today on the show, I have Ron Song. Ron is an improviser, an actor, a former accountant? No, what was your previous job?
Yeah, so I did philanthropic data analytics.
Oh, I have no idea what that means, but okay.
Higher education institutions and annual giving and pipeline management. So little things like that.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, you had like a proper real life job. I met Ron at Second City Hollywood. He was coming up a couple sessions behind me. And I remember everyone there is so young. So I remember saying like, hey, there's someone who's closer to my age. He might even be older than me. And I just remember watching the one scene from your grad review. Mm-hmm. And you stood out. You were so hilarious. It was so great. And I didn't know who you were at the time. And so then, of course, through all our mutual friends and everything, I got to meet you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really start thinking about, I never wanted to be in entertainment.
Oh, really?
Honestly.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always liked like karaoke and like little things like that with my friends. And I when I was in grad school, I have an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Okay.
And I studied sculpture there and sculpture as an undergrad.
Oh, so then is that how you met your wife? Because she does ceramics, right? Oh,
so
okay.
My wife Carrie is a ceramic artist. Yeah.
I did not realize that. That's so cool. That's so interesting. I didn't know about that side of you.
So yeah, that's where we met in Chicago. And my mother-in-law bought me because she thought go to the Second City and take a class there. So she bought me a drop-in class at the Second City Chicago, and I never used it.
Okay.
Part of the reason was that I used to live very close to the Second City in Chicago, and I could walk there. So I saw one show once, and then a friend of mine and I used to go have beers at this little Irish pub across the street, and we went there a couple times, and it was the same place where all, like, after classes were over, all the students would come in and we would have a beer, but they would just be constantly doing bits. And so my friend and I, who's a lawyer and he still lives in Chicago, he and I were both kind of talking about this, and like, do they ever turn off? Like, it's like constantly on. And it was not something that, it really drove me away from attempting it, because I thought, well, maybe
They're
maybe
annoying.
I'm not that funny and funny enough to commit to doing bits constantly. Right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll just stick to,
Stick to your quiet art.
Yeah,
making
art
sculptures.
Working in nonprofits, and I started doing that, and I worked at the University of Chicago for 5 years, and then we moved to Northern California and worked at Stanford for another 5 years, and then a short stint at Santa Clara University, and then to UC Irvine.
And that's what brought you back down to Irvine then, was the job at UC Irvine. Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious how you guys ended up in Orange County.
And
But did you grew up in Orange County?
I grew up in near San Gabriel.
Oh, okay.
So here in LA. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But when I was out in Irvine, my wife and kids were still up in Northern California transitioning, and they're finishing up school and so on. So I thought, well, gosh, I'm by myself. I want to be also a better manager. And when I was at Stanford, I learned about applied improvisation and how improv can really help listening. And, that's a really important skill to be a supervisor. And I was struggling to sort of manage a team. And I thought, man, gosh, what better way to improve that than take classes at the Second City.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine from high school also recommended that, rather than like UCB or Groundlings, which they all took different approaches. But, the Second City was really about relationships and how you can center whatever, sketch around that, right?
Yeah.
And how the relationships really drive the basis of the communication. And so I thought, okay, great. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So I took a class, and Kevin McGeehan was my first improv teacher for Improv 1.
Yeah. And
he asked this question. He said, so who's here because your manager or agent asked you to take classes, improv classes? And, 80% of the class raised their hand. Who's here because they think improv is going to be great for their acting career, and then the rest of them raised their hand.
Uh-huh.
And then he said, like, why are you here? And I said, I thought, well, okay, it's really because I wanted to be a better listener, and I thought, okay, being a dad, I wanted to learn how to do that, and like hear my kids out better, and do all, like, just be a better person in general.
Yeah.
But specifically, to be a better manager, a better supervisor. That was really interesting because I didn't know what else to say at the time.
Yeah.
But I ended up loving the class. Like, it was just, there's no place in the world that I've ever been to, no human interaction where everyone is rooting for you.
Yeah.
Right. And they're rooting for you openly. And the rules of the game are not to judge. Right?
Yeah.
And so that specific kind of environment helped me think, wow, the rest of the world should be like that. Like, if the world were that way, like, how we would have so many more happier people, just in general. Yeah. So, and then every instructor I met there, just, from Allison Bills to Ron West to, Eileen Monteleone, like, everyone was just so welcoming and And Frank Coyote, oh my gosh, like everyone was so great.
Yeah, everybody's rooting for you. I think that was, I had the same experience coming into it. It just felt so warm and welcoming. It felt like, oh, these people will be family with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I myself did some iOS, like in my mid-20s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I dabbled in that. And then I don't know, I got distracted and I didn't go back because, I don't know, probably I was actually insecure and scared or something. And the environment was very different there.
Yeah.
For me personally, I know a lot of people who felt that Iowa was their home. It didn't feel like my home. And I learned a lot, and I liked the teachers. I wish I had stuck it out, but the environment wasn't as supported. Whereas at Second City, I felt completely supported. And I don't know if that was just where I was at in my life or if that was the culture. But definitely my experience with Second City has been that everyone is welcome. Just bring it all in. Bring your baggage. We're going to help you work through it. Yeah. We're going to lift you up, and we're going to call you on your crap when you do have crap.
I think it's such a hard thing to do, to put aside your, break through all of these sort of natural walls that you build up for yourself to protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
That in order to improvise, you have to tear those down and be open to anything.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like you can't do that if everyone is judging you, right?
Yeah.
Like, and not supporting you.
Yeah.
So I learned that was important. And I've gone through, through the program, and I liked it enough to just say, well, I'm going to stick it out and go through the entire program. And, we did the grad review there and performed, which was great. And Carrie, my wife, would come to every single show, like from Improv 1 all the way through the end of grad review.
My husband too.
It was like, and really for me, somehow it was like just an audience of one. Like,
yeah, it would just be Carrie.
Like, if I can make her laugh, then great. Kids learned the song that we sang because I had to practice it at home, and they picked it up faster than me, and I was so jealous how their brains work so quickly to absorb the material. But it's like just fantastic to be able to do that and enjoy it. And then I thought I could just go back because it was the happiest place I could be. Yeah. Because, to compare that against the kind of structure that you go through every day in the corporate environment. There are great rules and governance in place to help people through a human resources perspective to behave within a kind of narrow behavioral kind of spectrum. Yeah. So you're not being a dick or being, just some kind of jerk or sexually harassing someone or bullying anyone. Like there are rules of governance, right?
Yeah, there are clear boundaries.
Yeah, and that's important. But given that, there's also pettiness and, passive-aggressive behavior and toxicity. And I think all of that still exists because we're still human. Yeah. And because there's a hierarchical environment, there's also a misconception of how and who people are based off of title or, salary or anything along those lines. And the challenges there are still real, but the improvisation environment and the class environment that I was in just was such a relief from all of that kind of pressure. Yeah.
Well, you also, everybody is there because they want to be there. They're spending money to be there. Whereas at work, sometimes people are in a job that they don't really want to do. Maybe at one point in time they thought it would be a good fit, and now they feel stuck and they don't know how to get out of it.
And it was you're exactly right. Like that was the love for me. It was really what drove me to drive an hour and a half in the worst traffic in LA from Irvine on Monday nights to go to class because, where else do you get that kind of joy, right? Is what I thought. And so I thought, okay, this is great. This is a good respite from all the kind of the horrors of the week, right? Yeah. And just manage through it. It helped me manage through all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once you finished the program, what made you decide to keep exploring acting? Well, you had a team. You had your all Asian team. Mm-hmm. Was your intention to continue acting as a hobby? Did you ever consider it as a profession?
No, I didn't consider it as a profession. Not until recently. But at the time, I just noticed at the Second City, and then maybe it's just a function of the time, you know, it was like 2018 to moving into 2019, like just early 2019. I noticed that there wasn't really a lot of Asians taking classes, and or in comedy. You know, at the time, Bowen Yang wasn't on SNL, and he was a writer, I think, but he wasn't actually like a featured player. You know, Ken Jeong was
who he is,
who he is, and there's also, you know, Joe Coy, and there's other folks that were stand-up comedians, and I know there's like you know, all of that was sort of burgeoning and growing, but at the Second City, I didn't see an Asian American team. So I just asked Josh Funk if he would allow me to put one together, and he thought it was a great idea. And I was like, okay, now we have the pressure of putting something together.
Now you're committed.
Yeah. And, you know, I met, you know, a few folks that I thought were really great through the program, you know, Takaki,
he's really
Jose,
funny.
Akin.
Oh yeah, Jose is great. He did. He was our music director for our grad show.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And let's see, you know, Leah Dove, right? And just Christina Shu. It was such a great environment.
Yeah.
And we sort of got together, started put together a little writer's room. We thought we needed a director, and we're like, who could direct? And the suggestion came from the Second City and Jose to see if Peter Kim, who had just moved out here, a few years ago, he had moved out here from Chicago, and there was a little bit of controversy out at the ETC stage.
I remember reading about that. Yeah.
And, you know, when he came out here, we just thought, wow, what an amazing opportunity to see if he would want to work with us. And he's such a fabulous director, such a keen eye, and so kind. And it was great to be able to work with him and get to know him a little better.
Yeah.
But so he was our director, and we put together a monthly show, and that's how that all sort of started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then not too long after we both graduated, the pandemic hit. And we were kind of, I think many of us were kind of like, wow, what are we going to do now? I was on a house sketch team for a while. I was on Pompadour. But then, you know, baby was coming. And I decided not to audition for the next round of sketch teams because I was already like 7 months pregnant. So.
Yeah.
Then once baby was here and I was trying to get back into it, and pandemic hit. Yeah. And I think we both found some reps right around that time, just before the pandemic hit, which, like you said, at that point, what point did you think like, well, maybe I should dabble in this and try this out as a profession?
I don't think that came as too serious a consideration until probably last year, 2020.
Or 2 years ago now.
Gosh, 2021, right.
Yeah, because 2020 was when the pandemic hit.
Right. So it was 2021. I started thinking, like, maybe.
Oh, even because you were booking work during the pandemic, and you still weren't thinking of it.
I wasn't thinking about it.
Oh my gosh, Ron! You had you started booking stuff right away, like you were booking commercials, yeah, and you even booked a co-star, and you still were like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's wow.
I was very fortunate to book a commercial But it's funny because that commercial, which was directed by one of my absolute favorite directors, Michel Gondry.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So my very first commercial, I got to work with one of my absolute favorite directors.
Wow.
He did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and like just so many other great films.
Yeah.
And you Be Kind, Rewind, and I got to work with him.
He's great.
And he was fabulous. And I did just a little thing, but what ended up happening is I think people can look up the commercial on YouTube. It's like Burger King cow farts.
Okay.
So it was pretty great and innovative at the time, but if you think about the kind of political environment that's out there right now, that sensibility to say, hey, eat Burger King burgers because, they're reducing methane, which is great, by feeding cows lemongrass, which is also, really great and innovative. But the political environment, this was still, Trump as president of the United States. Mm-hmm. The elections were about to happen, and it was, it was a really kind of dark time.
Yeah.
So somehow that message didn't hit, and then it sort of came on, and they took it off the air, and
oh my gosh,
like I think they only aired it like maybe in Mexico or California.
Oh. So you didn't make the big bucks on that one that you were hoping to. Oh.
No. But what was nice was that the work was great.
Yeah.
And it was just so much fun to
just getting to work with that director is
and I got to stand
huge.
next to a giant cow. Like this cow was, I didn't realize they generated so much heat. Like you stand next to a cow and they're really, it was gentle and kind, but they're also, they could push you very easily.
Oh yeah. I've had I grew up in a pretty rural place, and so I've had my experience with cows and sheeps. Sheeps are jerks. I will just say they're not nice.
Right off here, like everyone, please know, sheep are jerks.
Sheep are jerks. They will push you around to get what they want. I'm also not a very big person, so maybe they just were like, just move that,
They're creatures of opportunity.
Yeah.
Push whoever they
don't let them fool you. Okay, so then you're booking stuff, but you're still working your job. You're balancing it all. And then, as I recall, at some point you also got invited to start teaching at Second City when they started doing online classes again? Or?
Yes. And I think this was a function of the efforts for greater inclusion and DEI as part of the Second City sort of rehabilitation. And so I was very fortunate to be in a place where I was able to teach, some sketch writing, and that was fantastic and lovely. So we had a lot of things going on at the same time. I was putting together a conference for, my professional life for prospect development, and I was on the committee to sort of put together the curriculum for that. And at the same time, I was teaching. And luckily for me, I think the pandemic was very helpful in one specific way. And that was that self-tapes became the norm, right?
Yeah.
Instead of coming in. So having to travel back and forth from Irvine to LA to do auditions would have been time prohibitive for me. It would be really challenging.
Yeah.
So if that were to have happened, I don't think I could have continued. Yeah. So I think in some ways I owe a lot to the pandemic and self-tapes to be able to continue to do like creative work like that. And so that's kind of how it all continued to move forward.
That's really neat. I think the pandemic kind of offered that to a lot of people. It kind of like allowed people to make a transition that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
Either found the time or found the space, mental space, what have you,
yeah.
in order to like kind of go after things that they really wanted.
And I think that's, if it wasn't for that, and if it wasn't for just the joy, the counterbalance between work, which is great and fulfilling, rewarding. And I think UCI is a great and fantastic, institution that deserves support. So I really believed in the mission. So that was important for me. And at the same time, I think the joy I found in doing creative work was something I had missed since grad school.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I did some performance art then, and being able to go into a studio and make work and explore and just really kind of immerse yourself in pure research, that I think was my happy place. So this is great to be able to come into this. But I didn't think about this as a profession, because I didn't, this industry I think is very fickle and hard, and it's such a challenge for everyone, right, who wants to be involved.
Yeah.
So I never thought about it in any like very serious way.
Yeah.
But the opportunities are there, and I think I haven't come across any of those stereotypes yet, like the difficult stereotypes surrounding the industry. And I think part of it is because maybe what I want to do if I book a job, or if I want to learn as much as possible.
Yeah. You have that beginner's mindset.
Yeah.
Which I think is really important to carry through.
I hope that never goes away, honestly, because each show is going to be different, and each crew, like, it's so fascinating what each person does and how they coordinate together to be part of a show or a commercial, and that I will never get over that. Like, how wonderful a large group of people can come together in a short period of time and all have one mission together, and then when it's done, they all disperse and wish each other luck and hope they see each other again. Yeah. And but it's and then there's magical. A product. Yeah, it is magical in that sense. And so I haven't experienced any of the negatives yet. That's
really great. And I mean, I think what's really cool about your experience is that because there has been no weight on it, it's not, you don't have to make it as like what we call it, and that you don't have the need to prove yourself to anyone with this particular career or with your creativity. It's been like a fun kind of hobby up till now. And, I'm sure like you'll just be able to continue doing it and bring that fun and that joy. And so I wonder if, because the pressure isn't there, it allows you to just be open to possibilities. So like whatever comes your way, if you get it, great. And if you don't, you don't. And I think something energetically makes it so that you do have a little bit of that magic, and it draws those things to you, because there's an ease, I think is what I'm getting at. There's just an ease with the way that you're flowing in it. Yeah. I need more of that ease. And I think I'm getting there. I think I'm shifting to that ease as I kind of like find other creative hobbies and structures and put less weight on like getting those auditions.
Right. I think that's part of how I know one thing. I want to get better at doing this thing. I really do. The idea that the quote unquote, like, it's a craft, right? And I don't want to play into that too much, but it is something that you can always get better at. Yeah. And it is, again, it's that idea of this sort of the joy of pure research, to pick apart the sides, or to really read into the lines and figure out what the story arc is going to be in like 3 words or 3 lines, right?
Yeah, like, for those co-star roles, where it's just like...
All of that is super, super enjoyable to me. Yeah. And then, but once it's done and it's submitted, there's also a kind of point where there's a resignation to the fact that like it's done and you can't do anything about it. Yeah. And you send out what you send out at that time. And, I'm hoping 2 years from now, my self tapes will be better than they were 2 years ago, right? And that, I think, comes with that kind of practice. It's the main reason why I like auditions. And in that sense, I think, in-person auditions, I think I would like to be better at those too. Just because I think they present a different kind of performance challenge than
self-tapes.
The self-tapes, right?
I totally 100% agree. I've been looking at some of my my stats, and I noticed that when I do in-person commercial auditions, I'm usually getting a callback. But when I tape commercial auditions, I'm not getting a callback, which I think is interesting. I've gotten callbacks with some theatrical self-tapes. I haven't done an in-person theatrical because I got my theatrical agent in the pandemic. Theatrical doesn't really do in person unless maybe it's a callback or chemistry read or something. But yeah, I do think it's a different animal. And I think even if it's not so much about the craft, I think part of it is just getting to know yourself better.
Yes.
And as you get to know yourself better and you understand what works for you and what reads for you or what your type is and what special essence that you can bring to that character that nobody else can, and you just really lean into it, that's when it gets better. And that's kind of what I'm working on, is learning to bring my essence to the character reads instead of trying to give them what I think they want.
Yeah, because I think you can't be anyone other than who you are, right? And whatever you bring to the words or to the scene is going to be informed by your own experiences. I think that's really part of the key for me, is that I've resigned to the fact that I can't be someone different at this point, right? I'm pretty fully baked, but I can be better at communicating. I can be better at managing my own expectations. I think we can always try and be better people. That's always going to be important for me, is to just think, how do we relate to each other in a social environment, right? And that's how to behave on set.
I think that's something really cool that we can bring as middle-aged people and people who have had life experiences and had other careers. I think but I was a property manager for 15 years. Right. And so always wanting to be in this craft, but having had all those outside experiences and then coming into this, we kind of bring some of that wisdom and the professionalism from being in an office environment.
Right. Yeah. I think one of my first experiences on set was counterproductive to my own expectations around being timely, right? So because it was very important for me to be on time, and I learned that part of if you have a meeting, you have to be there right at that meeting, or if you have a Zoom meeting now, log in at least 30 seconds to a minute before, just so that you're available, checking your screen, checking the sound levels and all that before it starts, and blah blah blah. Right? That's those are all part of parcel of how you learn to be a professional. But that was counterproductive to being on set, because the second AD might say, or the AD might say, okay, we're gonna break for a little while. It's lunch. Everyone will be back by 2:30 or whatever it is the time is going to be. And the actors, they're expected to go back to their trailers and have lunch and do things like that if they have the opportunity to have a trailer. And the point for me was, oh gosh, it's now past 2:30, or it's 10 minutes to 2:30. I have to get back to this set. Otherwise, I'm going to be late. What I didn't realize is they just want to know where you're at, and then someone as long as they know where you're at, they'll come and get you.
Yeah.
And I was wandering around like, hey, am I going to be late? And talking to whoever I could just because I didn't want to be late.
Yeah, yeah.
And boy, the looks that people gave me, like, what are you doing? Just go back in your trailer, dude. Like, get in there. Like, do push-ups, whatever, right? Like, just hang out. Sleep if you need to. Like, there's a TV in there. And for me, that was really uncomfortable. So it was a learning experience. And I just had to learn the fact that, by the way, just be where you're expected to be.
Yeah.
And someone
There's a
will
different
come get
etiquette
you.
that you had to learn. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that was all like learning.
So how has your wife Carrie been doing with all this? I would assume that since she's an artist herself, it makes this kind of transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, she's been incredibly supportive, and if anything, that's been I think the thing that we want to hold most dear about our relationship. Yeah. She's also an Ironman triathlete, and I will Sherpa for her. I'll carry whatever bags that she needs. Yeah, because she can do hard things like that, and she needs that support. So I'll be there anytime to support her as much as I can. Yeah, and she looks at this in the same way. Like that's why she was there at every single show. From our very first improv class show to everything that we've put together. She's right there and very interested in like whatever television shows that or any kind of work that I'm possibly doing. And she's been my reader for my auditions, and she's just so supportive, and she's picked up more work to be able to help support and offset the potential loss in income for us. Yeah. To balance that out.
Well, that was a big decision for you. So you recently booked a big job. Yeah. And I mean, you kind of have one of those situations that every actor dreams of. And like, even like the 20-year-olds, when they come to LA, they think like, I'm just going to start acting and then I'm going to like book this big, fantastic job. And that like never happens. But it happened to you. And so congratulations. That's huge. I'm so happy for you. We can't get into like any details of it because it hasn't come out and you're still under an NDA, but just the experience for your family to make that transition. I imagine that was, did you end up having to quit your job?
I did.
Yeah. That's a huge decision to make. So I want to hear a little bit about how that went down.
Yeah. So I talked to my parents, I talked to Carrie, my wife, and my boys, and we really sort of discussed what the impact that this might be. And a friend of mine, the same friend who I used to visit and go to these bars across from the Second City in Chicago, contacted him. And we all sort of talked about this at different times. And the overwhelming advice was that if you don't do it, you will regret it, right? For the remainder of your life. And I thought, wow, gosh, because opportunities like this don't come around every day. Yeah. And it's something to really allow yourself and be comfortable with yourself to be able to say, do you want to live a creative life, or do you want to live a life where it's structured and there's predictability and so on, but you have to deal with that, the negatives of that as well. Right. And I thought, well, okay, I'll consider that very carefully. But the tipping point for me was talking to my parents. Yeah. And my dad, who, has been reading up on death and dying, and, he's 82 now. And he's really thinking about, just kind of taking stock of his life. And one of the things that he's read is that, the vast majority of people on their deathbed don't regret having made more money or, having purchased more cars or things. The biggest regret is they didn't take more risks in their life. And so he encouraged me to take this risk at, 51 or 50 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But I did it and I don't regret it yet.
Yeah.
And it was just a fantastic experience, and one that I wouldn't change or exchange, or it was just fantastic.
I'm so happy for you. I think like that really is the dream, and I can't think of a more deserving person.
Oh my gosh.
Honestly, Ron, you one, your talent, but also I think your heart and the way that you live your life. You live your life very open and like open to the possibilities, and so I think it's really cool that you made this decision with your family, and that everyone just fully supported it. It makes me really excited to hear that even your dad was like, because usually it's the parents who are like, no, choose safely, choose wisely. And maybe it's different now because your parents are closer to death. And so for them, they're, not that they're dying. I just realized how that sounded. They're closer to the possible end of their life. They're probably going to live another 20 years, maybe 30. But just having that insight of having lived 82 years is what I mean. And like realize when you start to take stock, like what were the moments that mattered, and taking this risk is probably, I think it's going to be one of those things that is going to stand out for your boys too, is like, you're setting an example for them that they should be going after the things that they have a passion for in life. And it's okay for that, because not that you're not passionate about your philanthropic work, but sometimes your passions change and it's okay to pivot.
Right. And that's all we can hope for our children, is that they do find something that they're really passionate about, and so much so that they can overcome the difficulties of pursuing it, whatever that is, right? That's the only thing you can hope for. And, I think all throughout our lives, in my life specifically, I've thought about hedging, right? Oh, if this doesn't work, then you can fall back on this. Or if this doesn't work, then, you can have these plan Bs. And the thing about the actors that I've met, and I've talked to the ones that are super passionate about, this field and this work, is that regardless of what happens, there is no plan B for them. Yeah. Like, this is it. And they love it so much that they will do whatever is difficult to be able to overcome all the challenges that exist with the fickle environment and, the choices and getting seen, and just so much to be able to pursue the thing they love. And that is incredibly inspiring for me. Yeah. So right now I'm trying to put aside the plan B and say, okay, this is the thing that not that I was meant to do, but just that this is the thing that I love. Yeah. And recognizing that and being able to say, I really like it.
And this is the thing that you're meant to be doing right now. Right. Doesn't mean that you should have always been doing that, but this is where you're at right now in your life.
And I think about that too, because had I wanted to pursue this earlier, the opportunities, I don't think would have been there. I agree. The culture has shifted, and the content has changed and become so much more diverse. It still has a lot of ways to go. Yeah. But the fact that Apple's put out Pachinko, how wonderful is that? Obviously, Min Jin Lee's book is amazing. Big shout out to her, but the fact that it was made and accepted, and now we get to see this multi-generational show, and there's so much more content that I think is viable, and knowing that there's a lot of people that want to watch themselves, right, and see the representation, and the stories don't diminish because you have diversity. They actually get better and much more accessible and far more interesting. and nuanced, and we're all ready for that, I think.
I agree. I think so too. I think there's so many stories that are out there that have yet to be told, and I think also like for your kids, who are mixed, they're going to have a different story to be told of being half Asian and being half white. I know for me, being half Mexican and being half white, like that's another angle with the diversity and the inclusion is there's the binary, and then there's those of us that have a little of each, and like it's a slightly different spin for us. So I think the stories will continue to evolve, and we'll start to see like all the insights of the cultures mingling, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like that representation matters, right? To be able to see yourself in the characters that are being portrayed, no matter how wild or silly they can be.
Yeah,
it's just, I think it like so important and inspiring for everyone else to be able to say the opportunity exists, right? As long as the opportunity exists. I never thought that when I was younger. I thought there's just no way that someone would, like, it's just not
want a middle-aged Korean man to be.
Yeah. And even, I thought about that when I was at the Second City. I think if you approach it from the perspective that it's all about age, or it's all about, I can't tell you how many times I had to play the dad, right? Just in the sketches.
Yeah.
But it's okay as long as you bring yourself to it. Yeah. And I don't mind, and I never did mind that.
Yeah.
I think the idea is, how do we approach the yes-anding of the group in a way, and you put your trust in everyone to be able to say that there are moments of viability for everything, right, that we do.
Yeah.
Regardless of what age you put us at. And so maybe the first sketch, you have to play the dad. But after that, you can write something on your own where you confound those expectations of age. And what I found that was so lovely was that we were all just performers there. And we just did what we did, and it was fine.
Yeah.
Right? And it didn't come into play that because of my age, I might have been not as showcased in a sketch or not, right? It was never a question about that.
Yeah, the age didn't really matter. No. Yeah, it just mattered when everybody wanted to stay out until 1 a.m. and you were like, I got to go home. Right. At least that's how I felt.
At 10:30.
I have kids. I have to get my kid to school, so I'm going home.
Exactly. But it will affect folks if that's your point of view. If you come into it with that baggage, then you will have to struggle with that baggage, right?
No, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're constantly just seeing yourself as like the old person, or like you're the fish out of water or something. Right. Yeah. Right. But I think, I think you kind of have a young mentality. I know I generally do as well. And so like all the quote unquote kids that we were coming up with, they didn't treat me like I was, different. Right. Just because I was, at the time, I was in my late 30s, or that I had children. Yeah.
I loved the fact that my teammates at the Second City, they wanted to meet my kids and come over, and they played with the lightsabers, and we went around the block in Irvine, a late night walk, and it's just so great to have that kind of accepting friendship. And it's not, I won't forget that.
I think there is a certain specialness, even coming into it, like, later, like I said before, for me, I wanted to be an actor much younger, and it didn't happen. But what I think is neat now is that coming back into this career at this age, I feel like I'm more aged into my castability. I think when I was younger, like I wasn't the hot chick, but I wasn't like just like the girl next door. Like I just didn't know where my niche was. And so now I'm mom, I'm the teacher, I'm the next door nosy neighbor. And I think that comes with grace and age and, like I can be the hot mom now,
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of advantages to being the middle-aged person in this industry or like in your art. Even like if you look at like older people who come into like writing or painting as an older person, we bring a kind of depth and we don't take ourselves so seriously and we're not jaded from years of rejection. You spoke about the auditions, you get the audition, you put away. I've gotten to a good place. I'm really proud of myself because I've gotten to a good place where like I can do a self-tape and like when I'm preparing it and I'm doing the work and doing the research, that's what matters. But once I'm done with it, I forget about it because I'm realizing that I'm not putting my self-worth on it. I'm focusing on the projects that I'm making on my own.
Yeah. It just all feels like an opportunity to perform a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
just play with it and have fun.
Yeah. And then once you're done, you're done with it. And if they like something about it, it's not a reflection of whether or not they like you or not. It has nothing to do with, again, with your self-worth. It's just might not be the right fit at the time.
Yeah,
that's completely fine. So my wife Carrie, she likes to watch the shows that I didn't get the parts on, right? To see, is this person better?
I do that too.
And so she'll watch that and she'll sort of point it out, like, hey, this could have been you. Yeah. And I thought, maybe, but at the same time, this person that's on there's like just killing it, just crushing it. They did such a great job, and like it wasn't for me. Yeah. And that's completely fine. I think we will find the things that come to us at the time that's right.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll make it on our own.
Yeah, exactly.
I find that I go back and I look to see who got it. And sometimes I watch it and I go, oh, I wasn't what they were looking for at all. That's like, it's so clear to me. Like, I just was not the person that they needed for that role.
Right. Yeah. And that's just, and it's okay. And that's the thing that's, I think, part and parcel of all of this too, is because you don't know, right? This is a weird industry where you don't get a lot of feedback.
Yep.
You don't know what someone is thinking. But at the same time, as performers, we all have this sort of innate desire for external validation, right? Like we're always seeking, like, approval and, hey, is this okay? Or did this happen? And so, there's a certain amount of self-consciousness that comes with that. Uh-huh. And that validation being, an important part of how we define where we can go or how we can shape ourselves, right? I think is valuable, but at the same time, it doesn't really tell you who you are as a person, right? And it's just this thing. Yeah. And so I have so many other things to do. Like I've got to clean the house some days, or I've got to finish the laundry that my wife asked me to set up because she's teaching classes, or I've got to get ready for the kids to come back home and we got to figure out dinner and another show that we're going to watch in the evening. Yeah. So I don't have the luxury and I don't want to focus on that as much of like, what did I not get? Or, looking back at my self-tapes and going, oh gosh, was that performance? Like, critiquing myself at that point is not, something that I find a lot of, I don't find it to be that helpful.
Right, because your value isn't in that. You know that you have so much value and all the other things that you do with your life. You have a life.
But I also do want to take a bunch like classes because again, I want to get better at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the next step for me. Yeah.
Is getting into a good class.
Having more opportunities to work on scenes with other people. Yeah. Different types of scenes and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are getting near the end of our time here, and I just wanted to ask you, for you, what does making it mean to you? What does success in this industry look like to you?
Wow, that's a really it's a big question, and one that I've thought about a little bit, and I think for me, and this will continue to evolve. I think right. At the beginning, the idea of making it, and again, I never put it that way. It was just being able to having opportunities to work.
Yeah.
So, being able to work was important. The second thing was, if I got paid to do something, that felt remarkable.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, wait a minute, now I'm a professional actor.
Yeah. You're in the union. Right. You signed up.
And then, to be able to join the union, I think that was also a really important step. But ultimately, I think right now, what I would consider to be successful is having a broad enough community of creative folks that continue to want to work with you, that feels collaborative and consistent, and so you feel like you're working.
Yeah.
And you're working in ways that challenge you and doing things that are scary, right?
Yeah.
That you have some trepidation over, and that you're thinking, gosh, I would never have thought about doing something like this. And, if you have the opportunity to challenge yourself, I think that's probably the thing that I would find to be most successful, is to be able to do that and continue to learn. That's it for me.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they do say, one of my teachers would say that, like, getting an audition is like winning the lottery, and booking the job is like getting hit by lightning. So I think you're right. If you book some work and you're getting paid to do it, then that's huge. Remarkable. That's huge. Success right there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for driving all the way up here and taking the time to sit with me and have a conversation with me.
Absolutely.
I think you're one of my favorite people to talk with about this stuff, because you are so open, and I think you have a really great perspective on a lot of this. And I think it helps. You're so grounded, and I think it grounds the people around you and the people who get the opportunity to work with you. So that's a great quality to have.
I hope we get a chance to do that.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really can't
I've been writing, and we're going to figure out something that we can all do together.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ron.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you made it through this episode, thank you, thank you. I hope you fell in love with Ron and his sweet, soft heart as much as I did. He has several projects coming out this fall, and you won't want to miss them. There's a reason he booked so much work in such a short amount of time. So please follow Ron on Instagram at Ron's Song. That's RONSSONG. He's got that double S there. And be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen, and follow us on Instagram at Making It After 40, the number 40. If you want to see what I'm up to besides podcasting, check out my Instagram at Lisa Rodriguez. That's Lisa Roiriguez. And I hope you'll tune in again next week. Thank you, everyone.